Welcome to a Fish Out of Water podcast. This is your host, Richard Lippman. Today, we're interviewing David McGillivray. This podcast is sponsored by Collybird Inc.
Well, hello, I'm David McGillivray, and I'm a horror icon and comedy legend.
You were born in 1947 and brought up in London, is that correct? What was the scene like back then?
Well, I can't remember when I was born, I'm afraid. But later on, as you may have heard, the 1950s it was a very restrictive time. There was a lot of censorship. The times weren't very liberal, let's say that.
I understand that in the movie industry there was something called Edie's levy, is that correct?
Yes, that did exist, I believe. I think we were the one of the last films. We're jumping forward hugely now to 1980 to benefit from the Edie levy.
So was it easy to get, it passed and subsidized by the government? Were films easy to get subsidized?
Well, I've always paid for my films myself. No one's ever given me any money, but the long forgotten Edie levy was a system whereby I think it was a percentage of the ticket price went into this fund, and then the government gave you some money back. But it's so long ago, I can't remember. They probably gave us 25 quid.
Right. So going back to the early days, when you were brought up in your teenage years, I understand that you always wanted to work in acting, as documented in your autobiography that's currently out. And then you suddenly got into horror writing, right? Is that correct?
I've always loved horror, and this stems from my childhood, where my father would take me up to London's West End and I would guide him away from the places of interest so that I could gaze up in awe at the London Pavilion on Piccadilly Circus, because that's where United Artists premiered all their horror films. And you must remember I was about 8 or 9, gazing up, for example, at this gigantic spider hovering over the London Pavilion, and this was a film called Tarantula. And I was hooked on horror from that point on.
And did you have any ideas of what you wanted to do next? When
I always knew what I wanted to do. It's an enormous help to know what you want to do with your life from the age of 3.5, and that was the case with me. My parents took me to see a film called Singing in the Rain, and I looked at this fantastic array of colorful variety and thrilling dancing and singing, and I thought, I want to be part of this, and I was. I've never done anything else.
How did you get into movies?
Well, I got expelled from school. That's a far too long a story to get into, but it was 1964. It was very easy to get work in those days, and I think roughly 2 weeks after I got chucked out of school, I got my first job in the film industry. And this was packing films for an educational company called Gateway Films. And they were in Palmer's Green in North London, where I grew up.
How did you get that job? Did you know someone? Did you walk into the offices? Was there an advert?
I walked into the office. I said, I love films, and I impressed the manager, whose name was Robert Webb. and he gave me the job there and then.
Oh my God, if only things could work like that today.
Yes, I feel sorry for kids. It's not possible to do that sort of thing anymore.
It feels so organic. Um, so, you know, you started doing that. Then what happened?
I've done that ever since 1964.
But how did you move sideways? I mean, did you start writing at the time? Did you progress up the ladder, so to speak, or did you cross? Was it a very social sort of time, you know, where you could connect with people easily?
In the swinging 60s, yes, very much so. I've always written, so I was writing stuff as well that I never thought would be produced. The next big step, I think, was moving into London's exciting Soho district. Funnily enough, I'm about to give a talk on Soho in a couple of weeks' time for the Sohemian Society. And then I really felt part of the industry because the film industry was based in Soho. It was an enormously exciting time. And yes, I began meeting people.
Who did you meet?
Pardon?
Who did you meet?
Who did I meet? Who have I met in my life? Everyone. I've been very, very lucky indeed for various reasons. I mean, I've worked for every medium known to man, including radio. I've interviewed an astonishing amount of people. I can't believe it myself.
Back then, was there a particular person that's kind of changed your life, you know, when you early on, which gave you that stepping stone?
Oh, yes, without a doubt. I went to a party and I met a radio producer called Mike Sparrow, and he said, "Do you want to work for my film program, Close Up?" I said, "Yeah, sure. Never done radio, but my policy is always say yes to everything." And I started work for BBC Radio London in 1972, I think. And I've worked for radio ever since. I still write for the listings magazine Radio Times, which is, I believe, 102 years old this year.
Right. Very, very interesting. And before that, I could see that there were a number of films credited to Norman J. Warren. How did you meet Norman? You wrote two scripts for him, Satan's Slave and Terror. How did that happen?
Yes, well, as I say, I was working in Soho. One of my jobs was as a runner for uh, who were they? They were called Cineform. I'm not 100% sure what they did, but it doesn't matter anymore. But there were cutting rooms, I remember, either upstairs or next door. And a man called Norman J. Warren was in one of these cutting rooms, uh, editing his film Her Private Hell. And I liked to pride myself that I knew every film in production at that time, and this was a film I'd never heard of. And there was a good reason for this. It was being made as a non-union picture. So Norman didn't want any publicity because in those days the unions could close down a production if there wasn't a full union crew used on the picture. Anyway, Norman and I stayed in touch, and not that long after that, he needed a writer. And as always with me, I said, "Oh yes, I'll do that. I'll write you a screenplay," and and that's how it all began.
Um, did he have an idea of what the film would be about, or did you pitch the story to him, or did he pitch the story to you?
The first film was immensely difficult. So it was called The Naked Eye. And at that time, it was being created for none other than Vincent Price, who was my favorite screen actor. And I thought, I can't believe it. I must have been about 23 or 4. I thought, I'm going to work with Vincent Price. This is absolutely marvelous. Anyway, because you've never heard of the film, you'll realize that there's a reason for that, and it wasn't made. It all collapsed. I can't remember exactly why, but Norman was determined not to waste this opportunity, and he refashioned The Naked Eye into something called Satan's Slave. I wrote that as well, and Vincent Price's part was played by Michael Gough. Not a bad substitution, actually.
Where do you get the ideas for Satan's Slave? I mean, did you do a lot of research at the time, or were you involved in satanic sort of rituals?
I'd love to say that I used to sacrifice goats by the full moon, but in fact, I had nothing to do with the creation of this film at all. It was an idea that was already there. I think it was written by some other writer who had disappeared, and so I just elaborated on it. My ideas, well, they would have come from everywhere, including a lot of films I'd already seen.
Right. And then there was Terror, and then other films for Walker, um, Frightmare, House of Whipcord, House of Mortal Sin, Schizo. Um, were you influenced at all by Dario D'Argento?
Oh, I was way before him. But then we all saw Suspiria, and we saw the way that the direction horror was going in, and everybody wanted to copy um, Dario. And Norman's film Terror was basically a British Suspiria.
Would you say they were sort of cult films today? I mean, how's it seen?
Well, they are now, but they were rubbish at the time. Nobody went to see them. And they were cheap exploitation pictures. Got terrible reviews mostly. But down the years, you can rely on almost everything becoming a cult.
I see. There was also involvement with, other sort of filmmakers in various scenes. I understand that there were some things in the UK that were deemed on the fringes or illegal. For example, sort of intimacy films and sexploitation films. But was there an audience for those kind of films at the time? I would sort of call it a subculture, would you say, or not?
Well, I mean, can you rephrase this? Because if the films were illegal, then they weren't seen, so there was no audience for those.
There was like I'm not feeling myself tonight,
Oh God,
1976. There was another one,
yes,
19
can't get away from that film.
hot girls, or and how did that come about? How did you meet John
John who?
Lindsay?
John Lindsay. Okay. Oh, this is going back again. I'm going to have to rack my brains for this one. I think I worked with his partner, Laurie Barnett. I think Laurie and John were involved in a film. Somebody else is going to have to help me here. Was it called The Pornographers? It was a documentary. Laurie had the idea of nicking a plot from a pulp novel he'd read about a sex ray, and he wanted me to change the plot enough so that we didn't have to pay copyright. And that film turned out to be I'm Not Feeling Myself Tonight. But by that time, the distributor had got wind of John Lindsay's hardcore career, and they took his name off the off the script. So I don't think his name appears on that film anymore. I didn't know him really well. I remember interviewing him, and I found his career absolutely fascinating. I've always been
In what
fascinated by pornography.
in what way?
In what way was I fascinated by pornography?
Yes.
Because it was forbidden. I've always been drawn to the forbidden. I've always been anti-censorship. I got a thrill out of watching stuff that I wasn't supposed to be watching, and that's carried on all the way through my life, all the way through the video nasty scandal, where we were then swapping illegal tapes on VHS. I've always been a rebel.
I see. So, how did you get? Yeah, so you got to meet John. Did he commission you to write the story, or how did that work at the time? Did you get an upfront fee, or
Who's this?
John Lindsay when you wrote
No, I was working for his partner Laurie Barnett,
yeah.
and he was in control of that project, and he was working for a distributor called New Realm, I think. So that yes, they would have come up with my enormous fee.
When you were writing, did you write on paper? On did you type? Did you have
I've
several?
never written by hand. What I wanted when I was a boy was a typewriter, and my father stole one from his office, brought it home, huge, great, royal, absolutely enormous, and I started typing on that. I taught myself to type, and I then graduated. So I moved on to an electric typewriter, and from there to my computer keyboard I'm sitting in front of now. And as I say, I don't think I have ever written with a pen.
In those days, when you're writing script, I know it's a very generic question. Were there several drafts? How many drafts did you have to write and rewrite?
Well, it depends on what medium you're talking about. It depends on the project, so there's no set answer to that. Sometimes there's multiple drafts. Sometimes the first draft was accepted, and often I produce my own films, and I produce what I want. I don't rewrite those scripts; they're mine, and I think they're good.
Tell us about producing your films. When did that begin?
First film I produced was The Errand in 1980. I mentioned it earlier because we were the last film to gain money from the Edie Fund. Thoroughly enjoyed that. That was directed by a friend of mine called Nigel Finch, no longer with us. Didn't do another film for a very long time. But this century, we're talking now, I thought, oh, I'd like to produce some more horror films. And I began making them. I have no idea how many I've made now. There's a considerable number, and quite a few of them have been joined together on a DVD called Worst Fears. I do believe it's still available.
So, was there a certain element of control? Is that something that you wanted?
I like control, yes. I've often had arguments with people who I think don't know as much as me. And so like to be the guy at the top, organizing everything. I think I've got a knack for that, both in film, theatre, all the various media I've worked in. Of course, other people may disagree.
And creative control. How do you work with actors? Is that
How do I work with them?
how do you know that that's
Well,
wrong? How do you
pardon?
How do you know that they're good for the role? Casting.
Oh, that. Not bad at casting. Normally get the right people for the right job, and that means not only being able to play the character, but being amenable as well, because you don't want to work with an utter bastard who's going to cause trouble. And I think that I and various associates I've worked with down the years have been quite good at weeding these people out and then getting exactly the right person.
Was it easy to raise funds for the films
Which film?
that you make in general? Your film.
Which film in particular?
Um, as producer, you did Worst Fears, Trout. As I see, you've done a lot of short films, right? Kiss from Grandma, I Wednesday, The Errand, right? Mrs. Davenport's Throat, Green Sleeves, all of those. Yeah, lots of shorts. Why shorts? Did
Yeah,
you?
we just talked about that. Yes, it's
Did you not want?
cheap.
It's cheap.
It's cheaper. It wasn't until very recently that I had enough money to make a feature. I could just about get enough money together to make a short.
What was it from? Production companies or was it private individuals?
Me, I paid for everything. No one's ever given me a penny.
Oh, I see. I see. Um, and then you moved on to documentary, right? Peter de Rome. What was your relationship with Peter de Rome? He was a someone who worked in in the LGBT scene within the films, mostly erotic or not. How was that?
Oh, that's an enormously long story, so I'd have to cut it down considerably. But I became aware of Peter de Rome very early on because his films were released in New York, I think around 1973, and pictures turned up in a magazine I used to write for called Films and Filming. I thought these films will never be released in the UK. They were hardcore, and I wasn't far out. They weren't released here for more than 40 years. Peter was rediscovered by a journalist called Rupert Smith that wrote that for Gay Times. That article was picked up by Brian Robinson of the British Film Institute, and he was determined to release Peter's films for the first time in the UK. And not only that, but bring Peter over to London from New York, where he lived, to introduce them. He, Brian, this is, asked me if I wanted to write an article for the booklet that was going to accompany the DVD of the erotic films of Peter de Rome. And I said, I'd rather make a film about Peter. And that's how I found myself in New York making a little film called Fragments. And that was released with that DVD.
And then you did another one in 2014,
Which
documentary,
one was that?
Grandfather of Gay Porn.
Oh, okay. We're still talking about Peter. So Fragments was about the many films that Peter had failed to complete, but it was only about 45 minutes long, our film. And Peter and I got on so well that I decided I wanted to make a much longer film about Peter's entire life. And that's what we did. You'll have to remind me of the year of that. Well, it was 2016, yeah, 10 years ago.
24.
Came out just after Peter died. Yes, I think that's still available, distributed by Peccadillo, I seem to recall.
Was that financed by the BFI?
Peter de Rome, Grandfather of Gay Porn. No, I paid for that.
Got it, right. And what was it about him? Was he an innovator in the field? I mean, today, adult material is very aggressive. And it, touches upon all sorts of stereotypes and sort of unusual desires. Was it different back then? Was there more play or comedy or storyline?
Well, of course, the genre was very wide. You began by asking me about why Peter was important. So I'll answer that. He was a real pioneer. He was making gay porn before anyone else. And it was only last week that I was taking part in an event at the Barbican on gay porn in the 60s. And I was talking about Peter and why he was important. He was not only a pioneer, I mean, we showed his film Scopo, which he made in 1966, the first official gay porn film. He was immensely imaginative and very artistic. He was influenced by all kinds of things, from classical mythology to Jean Genet, and that wasn't common then in the porn industry. Certainly not common now.
I see. And also back then it was illegal, was it?
It was illegal when Peter started, yes. So these films he made were never made intended for um, uh, being shown to the public. They were shown at private parties. Um, Porn was illegal both in New York, where he mostly lived, and of course in the UK. But a lot of very famous people came to these parties. Peter was very well connected. And that leads on to another story, because a very famous theatrical night came to see some films at one of Peter's parties. And well, where do you want to go from here? Because that got me into a lot of trouble.
Can you tell us that story?
Well, I can't name the celebrated theatrical night. I've never been able to, but because there's such a thing as, can I remember the phrase, being in the public domain, I can tell you that when I um, started making the film that Peter never made, which was written by a celebrated theatrical night, I contacted the John Gielgud Charitable Foundation, and I can mention that outfit because the story was in the Guardian, it was in the Daily Mail, and so it's a matter of public record. I thought they'd be delighted that I was making a film of the only known screenplay by this celebrated theatrical night. They weren't delighted at all, and they tried to stop me making it. We were already half finished, and it had a premiere lined up at Flair at BFI South Bank. The arguments between the lawyers, theirs and mine, I gather, according to Brian Robinson, went on until the morning of the screening. And the reason we were able to get away with what we did was that finally, at the last minute, we took the name of the celebrated theatrical night off the credits. The screenplay is now credited to a gentleman, and I can still, to this day, not mention his name because of the contract I made with the John Gielgud Charitable Trust. You can tell that this is a ridiculous situation, but that's the law for you.
I see. What happened thereafter? What was the reaction? I mean, what kind of film was it?
Trouser Bar was a remarkable film, written by Peter Jerome in his style by this celebrated theatrical night. And when I saw the outline, I said, Peter, you must make this film. But Peter, by that time, was long retired. He had no desire to make another film. And so after Peter died, I thought, well, there's only one thing for it. I'll have to make it myself. And yes, I submit that it was a modest success, in that, yes, it went all around the world. I think it won at least won award, and I was absolutely delighted with it. It was directed by a man who calls himself Christian Bjorn. I know him as Robert, but he was one of the most famous directors of gay porn, and Peter liked his films, so I thought, yes, this is the man to direct it.
And where was he from, Christopher, the director?
Well, he was born in the UK, but brought up in America. He was a porn star himself, and I think his stage name, Christian Bjorn, was inspired by the fact that he had a sort of Swedish look about him. But for many, many, many years, he's lived and worked in Barcelona, that's where he is to this day.
Why, has Barcelona got some sort of industry there, sort of film erotic industry, or what?
I think most of the major European capitals, at least, have got quite a major porn industry. I mean, nowadays everything is changing, of course, and nowadays porn generally means OnlyFans, and people are doing it for themselves. But looking back to the era we're talking about, yes, I think a city like Barcelona was perfect because of the climate, the liberal attitude, a huge amount of people willing to appear in these films.
I see. And at some point in your career, you went into theatre. What kind of theatre work would you undertake?
Well, that's how I started, of course. So we're going right back in time now, and I formed my own company called Entertainment Machine. Um, we started off in a little theatre called the Little Theatre near London's Leicester Square. And then for a long time after that, we were on tour all over the country.
Well, what plays would you put on?
So our most successful plays were the so-called Farndale Avenue series, and these were plays as performed by an incompetent amateur dramatic society. The first one was a hit in Edinburgh in 1976, and it led on to all the others. I think there were about a dozen in the end, but they're very rarely performed nowadays because of the success of our rivals, Mischief Theatre, who brought out their own franchise, The Play That Goes Wrong, and all its successors. And my goodness, I wish I had their money.
I see. And the kind of themes that you were focusing on, what were they? I mean, were they, social? Was it, based on classical themes or?
The first Farndale Avenue play was the Scottish play. And then it was such a success that we had to bring the ladies, the Farndale ladies, back again and again and again in a variety of different other genres. So we tried, goodness, now these plays are all up here on my shelves. Can I remember all of them? It's difficult now because it's so long ago, but we tried a musical, we tried a gothic horror, we tried almost everything.
Amazing. I understand there was some sort of collaboration at some point with Sue Van Collie. Do you remember? Do you recall any of these theatrical moments?
Well, it's going back a very long time, but I think Sue wrote songs for a couple of these shows, I think. Yes.
And were they well received? Was it played live or?
Was her music played live?
Yes, in the shows.
Ooh, not altogether sure. I think she did appear in one, and she was playing the piano, I remember. But otherwise, I think we did our version of A Christmas Carol. That was it, and the ladies performed a song that Sue wrote for that. Yes, I'd forgotten that.
Fantastic. I mean, you had a huge career, and that's as detailed in your book. We've got a few minutes remaining, and I'm going to put all the links for audiences, especially ones who are interested. Can you tell us what your future plans are?
Well, the immediate future is Panto in High Wycombe. I've just finished the second draft. There's a feature film that I can't say anything about, otherwise it's going to get me into even more trouble. We're in post-production for that. I still write for Radio Times, and as soon as we finish this, I'm going to have to start writing a couple of reviews for next week's issue. What else? Oh, it never stops. But the thing that takes up most of my time now is hospital appointments.
And influences and philosophies of life, what are they? Who are your heroes?
My influence was, as far as horror was concerned, was Nigel Neal. As far as comedy is concerned, my greatest influence was Spike Milligan. I thought he was a genius. He's influenced me enormously. So, everything I write, there's something of Spike Milligan in that.
And today, is it any better making films today than back in the 70s?
I still enjoy it, still love it. Wouldn't do it if I didn't. But yes, I made a little short last year called My Best Friends. Only took a week to shoot, thoroughly enjoyed it. And it opened at Fright Fest, and I was just as excited going on stage with the cast to introduce that film as I had been, 40, 50 years earlier. So I'm delighted to be able to say that I still enjoy it as much as I used to.
Fantastic. And do you have any one-line philosophies on life?
Yes, always say yes. I've never been known to say no to anything. If I'd said no, I wouldn't be where I am today, because if you say no, you have no idea of what you're missing out on. If you say yes, then you have no idea who you're going to meet and who can change your life. And that's happened to me again and again.
Right. David, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Can you tell your name and say that this is for a Fish Out of Water podcast?
Yes. I'm David McGillivray, and apparently I'm in a podcast called A Fish Out of Water. I wonder what it's going to be like.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to A Fish Out of Water podcast. This is your host, Richard Lippman. Should you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please get in touch. This podcast is sponsored by Collybird Inc.